Zara had grown used to the way her parents spoke about her, but the sting never went away. At family gatherings, when laughter filled the room and relatives shared stories, her name often came up only as a punchline. Her father would shake his head and call her a burden, the words sharp enough to cut through the air. Her mother rarely defended her. Instead, she would nod along or make a comment about how Zara had brought them nothing, while Kwame, her younger brother, was praised like a prince. Everyone in the room could see the difference. Kwame was treated as the shining star, the one who would inherit the family home and carry the name forward. He didn't have to try very hard either. His parents celebrated his smallest achievements as if they were great victories. Zara, on the other hand, could sit quietly and still somehow be blamed for spoiling the mood. Even when she offered to help with chores or contribute ideas, she was dismissed, as though her efforts had no value. Zara never shouted back. She never argued or cried in front of them. She would lower her eyes, keep her voice steady, and swallow the hurt. Deep inside, though, the words piled up like stones. The cruel treatment left her feeling invisible in her own family, but she refused to let them break her spirit. She carried herself with quiet dignity, holding on to a strength that her parents could not see, even as they tried to tear her down. The breaking point came on a humid Sunday afternoon when the whole family had gathered at Zara's parents' house. Aunts, uncles, cousins, everyone was there, eating, laughing, and catching up. Zara sat quietly at the corner of the room, listening more than she spoke, as she usually did. Things were calm until her father suddenly turned the conversation toward her. He looked straight at her and, with a mocking tone, asked, "And what has Zara ever done for this family?" The room grew uncomfortably quiet, but before anyone could say a word, he went on. "Nothing. She has done nothing but sit here like a burden. She wastes space while Kwame makes us proud." His voice was loud enough for everyone to hear, and a few cousins exchanged awkward glances, unsure where to look. Zara's cheeks burned, but she kept her head down, hoping the moment would pass. Then her mother, who could have defended her, added salt to the wound. "It's true," she said firmly. "This girl has brought us nothing but shame. We should stop pretending otherwise." Those words cut deeper than any insult. They didn't just dismiss Zara. They erased her completely. Laughter and chatter no longer filled the room. The air was thick with silence, broken only by the sound of her father clearing his throat, as if he had just delivered an important lesson. Zara sat frozen, her hands trembling slightly in her lap, though she forced them still. For years, she had learned to bear her parents' harshness, but this moment was different. This was not just criticism. This was humiliation in front of everyone who mattered in her. She could feel her cousin's sympathetic gaze from across the room, but she didn't meet it. Instead, Zara stood up slowly, steadying herself with a calm that surprised even her. She didn't shout back. She didn't shed a tear. She simply excused herself, her voice soft but clear, and walked out of the gathering. The sound of the door closing behind her echoed like a final decision. No one knew what was going on inside her heart as she stepped into the open air. They thought she was broken, walking away in defeat. But what they didn't know was that Zara carried something powerful, something her parents had no clue about. Hidden beneath their insults was a secret she had been guarding for years, one that could change everything they believed about her. That afternoon, as she walked away from the house, she made a silent promise to herself. She would no longer be their punching bag. She would let them enjoy their illusion of power for now, because when the truth finally came out, the same family who called her a burden would see her in a light they never expected. And on that day, she wouldn't need to shout or prove anything. The truth would speak for her. When Zara left home years ago, her parents assumed she was just drifting through life, the same way they always described her. What they didn't know was that every quiet moment she endured under their roof had pushed her to work harder in silence. While they dismissed her as a burden, she was quietly building a future that none of them could have imagined. It all started when she won a scholarship to study abroad. The day she received the acceptance letter, she kept it to herself, too afraid her parents would find a way to crush her joy. That scholarship was her escape, her chance to prove that her worth could not be measured by their harsh words. She packed her bags, left Ghana with little more than determination, and promised herself she would never waste the opportunity. Life abroad was not easy. She worked long nights, sometimes surviving on little sleep, balancing part-time jobs while keeping her grades high. But her effort paid off. She studied law and found mentors who believed in her, respected her, and saw the fire in her that her own family refused to acknowledge. These mentors guided her, introduced her to networks of successful people, and taught her how to think beyond the limits she had grown up with. It wasn't just law she poured her energy into. Zara had always been observant, and she noticed how the wealthy invested in land and property. With the little savings she earned from her scholarship stipend and side jobs, she took a risk, her first small piece of land back home in Ghana. Many would have thought it foolish, but Zara had vision. She understood that while her parents placed all their hopes on Kwame, she could quietly plant seeds that would grow into something far bigger than anyone expected. One property became two, and then more. She reinvested carefully, each time making wiser choices, guided by the knowledge she gained from her mentors. Every step was deliberate. Every decision was calculated. All the while, her parents back in Kumasi still believed she was lost somewhere in the world, barely surviving. They had no idea that their burden was becoming a woman of influence and wealth. Zara never flaunted her achievement. She kept her victories private, not out of fear but because she knew the right moment had not yet come. She understood that silence was her greatest shield and that power revealed too early could be easily underestimated or dismissed. What her family saw was a quiet, timid daughter who never spoke back. But the reality was far different. Behind that silence was a woman sharpening her mind, building her future, and gathering strength piece by piece. Zara had transformed her pain into fuel, her rejection into determination. And while her parents still praised Kwame as the only heir worthy of their name, Zara already knew the truth. She had built something they could never take away. She was no longer their burden. She was the storm they never saw coming. The whispers started small, almost like gossip, but soon the truth was clear. Zara's parents had made up their mind. They were planning to cut her out of the family inheritance completely. Relatives who visited the house began to murmur about legal papers being prepared, and one of her cousins finally told her the news directly. Her parents had filed documents naming only Kwame as the heir to everything. It wasn't shocking, not really. For years, they had treated Kwame as the golden child while Zara was left in the shadows. Still, hearing it confirmed felt like a knife to the chest. To be erased so easily from her own family's legacy, as if her blood didn't run through the same veins, as if her sacrifices meant nothing, it hurt more than she wanted to admit. Her parents didn't even try to hide their pride in the decision. Her father boasted at gatherings that Kwame alone would carry the family name forward. Her mother told neighbors that Zara had no place in their future. Some relatives frowned at the cruelty of it, but no one spoke up. In their eyes, it was a family matter, and no one dared to interfere. Kwame himself walked around with new confidence, already speaking as though everything belonged to him. He planned renovations, bragged about what he would do with the land, and never once considered what it meant to completely shut his sister out. To him, it was natural. After all, his parents had said she was a burden all her life. But Zara did not fight back. Not yet. She listened in silence, her face calm even when the words cut deep. She did not storm into their meetings or beg for fairness. Instead, she chose patience. She knew something her parents did not. She carried a secret they had no idea about, and she understood that timing was everything. At night, when she lay awake, she reminded herself that she was not powerless. Every insult, every rejection had prepared her for this moment. She could expose the truth anytime she wished, but she refused to waste her strength on anger. Instead, she waited, carefully watching as her parents celebrated too early, blind to the reality of what was coming. Those who thought she was weak would one day realize that silence does not mean defeat. Zara knew the law, she owned property, and she had allies more powerful than her family could ever imagine. While they wrote her off on paper, she was already rewriting her future in ways they could not touch. The injustice was real, but Zara carried it with a quiet resolve. She did not need to shout or fight in the open. The right moment would come, and when it did, the same people who called her a burden would watch the ground shift beneath their feet. For now, she waited, and waiting was her greatest strength. The news spread quickly. The family dispute had reached the Accra High Court. What had once been whispered about at gatherings was now official, stamped on papers and scheduled before a judge. Relatives shook their heads and whispered among themselves, convinced that Zara didn't stand a chance. She has already lost, some of them said. Her parents will crush her. Who would ever side with the child they call a burden? Their words carried the same weight of doubt she had lived under for years. On the morning of the hearing, the courthouse was buzzing. The corridors were full of curious onlookers, distant relatives, and even neighbors who had come to witness what they believed would be Zara's downfall. Most of them didn't come to support her. They came to see the drama unfold. To them, it was already written. The parents had the money, the influence, the power. Zara was just the forgotten daughter, standing alone. Her parents arrived first, stepping into the courthouse with an air of victory. Her father's chest was puffed out, as if the case had already been won before it began. He nodded to a few familiar faces in the crowd, smiling proudly, like a man who had everything under control. Her mother followed closely, her head held high, throwing quick glances at anyone who dared question their authority. They walked together with arrogance, as though they were attending a celebration rather than a court battle. Whispers trailed behind them. They're too powerful. No judge will go against them. Poor Zara, she should never have tried this. Some shook their heads in pity, while others smirked, waiting for the spectacle. Even Kwame, who strutted in beside his parents, carried himself like the heir he believed he already was. He looked at the crowd as though seeking their approval, soaking in their nods of agreement. But Zara had not yet appeared. Her absence made some of the relatives even more certain. "She's too ashamed," one muttered. "She won't even show up." They imagined her hiding somewhere, broken and defeated. Yet inside, Zara was calm. She had spent years preparing for this very moment, even when no one believed in her. She had studied the law, built her foundation, and gathered her strength in silence. Today was not a day to be frightened. Today was the day she would finally stand in the light, no longer hidden behind her parents' shadow. The courthouse doors would soon open again, and when Zara walked in, it would not be as the timid girl her family had humiliated. The stage was set, the crowd was waiting, and her parents were already blinded by their own pride. They thought the judge would easily side with them. What they didn't know was that the truth Zara carried was stronger than all their arrogance combined. And once it was revealed, there would be no going back. The courtroom was full that morning, every bench crowded with relatives, neighbors, and curious onlookers who wanted to see the drama play out. The air was heavy with whispers, people leaning close to each other, sharing predictions about how the case would end. Most of them were certain Zara would lose. To them, she was still the burden her parents had always called her, the daughter with no power. Then the doors opened, and Zara walked in. The room grew quieter, as if everyone needed a second look to recognize her. She wasn't in her usual simple dresses or quiet colors. Today, she wore a sharp black suit, tailored perfectly, paired with polished shoes and a calm confidence that filled the space before she even spoke. Her hair was neatly pulled back, her steps steady. There was no sign of fear on her face. Instead, she carried herself like someone who belonged there, like someone who knew exactly why she had come. Her parents turned to look at her, their eyes narrowing. Her father leaned toward her mother and muttered, still a burden, loud enough for those nearby to hear. Her mother shook her head with a scoff, refusing to even meet Zara's gaze. To them, her suit was just a costume, her confidence just a performance. They believed nothing could change the fact that she was beneath them. Kwame smirked openly, as if mocking her for daring to show up dressed like she mattered. But Zara did not flinch. She walked past their glares and took her place with quiet dignity. Her calmness unsettled some of the people watching. A few of the relatives who had been whispering about her defeat suddenly fell silent, their eyes following her every move. The judge finally entered the room, and the murmurs faded into silence. Everyone rose, then sat again as the proceedings began. The judge opened a file, his voice steady as he started reading the case detail. He spoke of the family estate, the properties, and the legal claim that had been filed naming Kwame as the sole heir. Each word carried weight, echoing across the courtroom walls. Her parents sat tall, their faces smug, nodding slightly as if the judge was confirming what they already knew. From their expressions, you would think the verdict had already been written in their favor. They didn't even glance at Zara, as if she was just another spectator, irrelevant to the outcome. But Zara listened carefully, her eyes fixed on the judge, her hands resting calmly on the table in front of her. She didn't argue, didn't interrupt, didn't show a single trace of nervousness. She knew this moment was only the beginning, and she was prepared for what would come next. In that packed courtroom, surrounded by doubt, whispers, and hostile stares, Zara sat steady, unshaken. No one knew it yet, but the real shift was about to begin, and it would start with the same voice that everyone assumed was reading her defeat. The judge cleared his throat and looked over the crowded courtroom. Everyone leaned forward, expecting him to declare Kwame as the rightful heir. Zara's parents were already smiling, their confidence written all over their faces. But then, with a steady voice, the judge spoke words that silenced the entire room. "According to official records," he said, pausing for effect, "the rightful beneficiary of the disputed properties is not Kwame. It is Zara Mensima Osei." For a moment, no one moved. The sound of Zara's full name, spoken with honor in that courtroom, seemed to hang in the air. Then came the gasps, sharp, shocked, and loud. People turned their heads from Kwame to Zara, eyes wide, mouths open. It was as if the entire world had tilted in a single second. Her parents' smiles froze, their faces draining of color. Her father shifted uncomfortably, as though he had misheard. Her mother's lips trembled, her eyes darting around the room, searching for someone to confirm it wasn't true. But the judge wasn't done. He continued reading from the documents, detailing how the properties, including the family's prized lands, were legally registered under Zara's name. The explanation unraveled everything her parents thought they controlled. Years ago, when the family had faced crushing debt, it was Zara who had stepped in quietly. With her savings from abroad and the guidance of her mentor, she had rescued the very lands her parents were about to lose. Instead of letting them slip into the hands of strangers, she bought them in her name, securing the family's heritage without ever seeking their approval. And now the proof was here, stamped and sealed, undeniable in the eyes of the law. The courtroom buzzed with whispers, some of shock, others of admiration. "So it was her all along," someone muttered. "She saved everything?" Another said under their breath. Even those who had doubted her, who had pitted her as the burden, were now forced to see her in a new light. Kwame's smirk vanished. He looked at his sister with disbelief, as though seeing her for the first time. His arrogance melted into confusion, his shoulders sinking under the weight of reality. This wasn't the story he had been promised. Zara, however, remained calm. She didn't smile, didn't gloat. She simply sat still, her eyes steady, as if she had been waiting for this moment all along. She had no need to celebrate loudly. The truth itself was enough. Her parents tried to object, their voices trembling, but the judge silenced them firmly. The documents are clear. The rightful beneficiary is Zara Mensima Osei. And just like that, the power shifted. The daughter they had mocked and humiliated was now the one who held the keys to the family's legacy. The courtroom had witnessed not just a twist, but a revelation. The burden they despised had been the savior all along. Her father was the first to react. He shot up from his seat, his voice shaky, but still loud enough to echo through the courtroom. "This must be some mistake," he barked. "Zara cannot be the owner. She is nothing but—" He stopped himself, realizing too late that the word burden was on the tip of his tongue. His eyes darted to the judge, hoping authority would bend in his favor, just as it always had at home. Her mother quickly followed, clutching her handbag like it was a lifeline. "Your Honor, you don't understand. Zara doesn't know how to handle property. She isn't capable. We filed the documents in Kwame's name because we thought it was best for the family." Her voice cracked, but it was not from shame, it was from panic. The judge looked unimpressed. He tapped the papers in front of him and replied firmly, "There is no mistake. The legal records are clear, and all transfers were made according to the law. It was Zara who rescued these lands from debt. Without her, there would be nothing left to inherit. It seems the only deceit here came from your attempts to disinherit her." Gasps rippled through the room. The parents' last defense had been stripped away with a single sentence. Her father tried again, his words stumbling this time. We only wanted what was best. Kwame was always—" "Enough," the judge interrupted sharply. His voice carried the kind of authority that left no space for argument. "This court will not tolerate lies or favoritism disguised as family tradition. The truth is on record, and it belongs to Zara." All eyes shifted back to her parents. The proud, arrogant figures who had walked into the courtroom now sat small and broken. Her mother avoided eye contact with everyone, her once proud chin lowered in defeat. Her father's hands trembled as he gripped the edge of the bench, his earlier confidence now replaced with visible shame. Kwame, who had been silent the whole time, looked as though the ground had fallen out from under him. His mouth opened, but no words came. For years, he had believed his parents' version of the story, that Zara was weak, unworthy, and destined to fade into the background. Now he saw her for who she truly was, strong, intelligent, and far more powerful than he had ever imagined. The sister he had underestimated was not a burden at all. She was the reason the family still had anything left to fight over. The room remained tense, the weight of regret heavy in the air. For the first time, her parents felt what Zara had carried all her life, the sting of being powerless in front of others. Except now, there was no silence to hide behind, no whispers to disguise the truth. Their arrogance had been exposed, their favoritism shattered. And in that moment, they realized something too late. The daughter they had dismissed had become the very foundation they stood on. Without her, everything would have collapsed. Zara rose slowly from her seat, the weight of years pressing against her, but no longer holding her down. The entire courtroom turned toward her, waiting to see if she would speak. Her parents looked at her nervously, still stunned, their pride cracked beyond repair. Kwame shifted uncomfortably, his eyes avoiding her. Zara took a breath, steady and calm, then began. "You called me a burden," she said, her voice clear and strong, echoing across the silent room. "But I carried what you couldn't." Her words cut through the air like a blade, yet they carried no anger, only truth. She paused, letting the silence work for her. Every eye was on her, and every ear leaned in. "When the family lands were drowning in debt, I stepped in. When strangers were ready to take everything away, I stood in the gap. You didn't see me then, because you never cared to look. You only saw weakness where there was strength. You only saw shame where there was sacrifice." Her parents lowered their heads, unable to meet her gaze. Zara did not gloat, nor did she raise her voice. She didn't need to. The dignity in her tone carried more power than shouting ever could. "I never fought you for your approval," she continued. "I worked quietly, not for applause, but because I loved this family even when you did not love me back. You said I had nothing to give. But today, you sit in this room because of what I gave." Gasps whispered through the crowd. Some nodded in agreement, others wiped at their eyes. The weight of her words filled every corner of the courtroom. She turned slightly, her eyes moving between her father and mother. "I will not humiliate you the way you humiliated. That is not my victory. My victory is standing here today, proving that your words never defined me. My dignity did. My choices did. And no one can take that away from me." Her father's lips trembled as though he wanted to respond, but no words came. Her mother's eyes glistened, her usual sharpness dulled by guilt. Kwame sat frozen, realizing that nothing would ever be the same again. Then something unexpected happened. The room erupted in applause. It wasn't just polite clapping. It was the kind that comes from deep admiration, from people moved by truth and courage. Some stood on their feet, others nodded at Zara with pride, as if they had just witnessed a historic moment. Zara did not smile, but her eyes shone with quiet strength. She bowed her head slightly in acknowledgement, then sat back down, her calmness unshaken. She had said what needed to be said, nothing more, nothing less. In that moment, everyone understood. She was not the weak daughter, not the forgotten child, not the burden. She was the strength of the family, the one who carried it when no one else could. And she had proven it without cruelty, only with truth. When the session ended, Zara stood and walked out of the courtroom with steady steps, her head held high. Outside, the air buzzed with voices and flashing cameras. Reporters rushed toward her, microphones raised, asking how it felt to win against her own parents. Strangers she had never met reached out to shake her hand, their faces lit with admiration. Some clapped, others called her name with pride. For the first time in her life, Zara was not invisible. She was seen, not as a burden, but as a woman of strength. Behind her, the courtroom was silent. Her parents remained in their seats, unable to move, their pride shattered. The same arrogance that had carried them in that morning now weighed them down like chains. They had bet everything on their own cruelty and lost it all. Kwame sat stiff, his eyes fixed on the floor, realizing the sister he mocked was stronger than he could ever be. Zara didn't look back. She didn't need to. Her victory was not about revenge. It was about reclaiming her worth. The years of pain, the endless insults, the loneliness, all of it had led to this moment. She had carried the family name when no one else could, and now the whole world knew it. She paused at the courthouse steps, the crowd pressing around her, and spoke her final words with quiet power. "A burden doesn't stand before the judge. A burden doesn't carry the family name. Today, I proved I was never their burden, only their lesson.